Let's think for a second about the most powerful person in your office right now. I bet you're picturing the loudest voice in the room, right? The one leading every single meeting, totally dominating the conversation. Well, in this explainer, we're going to completely flip that assumption on its head. We're going to dive into exactly why the quietest mind in the room is actually, well, the most formidable.
We live in a loud world. A world that just cannot stop screaming, where silence is so often mistaken for weakness or passivity or fear. But in reality, silence is actually a deliberate, highly strategic fortress. Because while everyone else is desperately clamoring for attention and kind of showing their entire hand through all that endless noise, the quiet ones are doing something much, much more powerful.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll tackle the myth of weakness. Then, the strategic observer. Third, we'll look at the biological freeze response. After that, protecting through silence. And finally, the weight of words.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, the myth of weakness, and how we need to reframe the quiet individual.
So, society falls for this massive misconception about quietness all the time. We tend to just assume that quiet people are passive, weak, totally disengaged from what's happening, or honestly just plain angry. You know how people get super uncomfortable when someone isn't talking? They immediately jump to, hey, what's wrong? Are you mad? But underneath that still surface, there is an intense, incredibly active reality going on. They're observing absolutely everything. They're processing information deeply, maintaining this insane level of personal discipline. And frankly, sometimes they're just taking a moment because they're emotionally overwhelmed by the sheer volume of the room. Their strength is entirely internal, rooted in a really deep understanding of who they are, instead of desperately needing external validation.
Moving on to section 2, the strategic observer. This is all about gathering ammunition, while the rest of the world just talks.
Now, while the loud voices are rushing to reveal their cards, the quiet observer is essentially acting as a human lie detector. Picture a high-stakes boardroom negotiation, right? The loud executives are throwing out numbers, making demands, just posturing. Meanwhile, the quiet person sitting at the end of the table, they are analyzing everyone's body language. They're catching these tiny, subtle tone shifts when the budget comes up. They're sensing the unspoken tension between the CEO and the CFO, mapping out behavioral patterns, and quietly pinpointing hidden weaknesses that literally everyone else is too busy talking over to even notice. Because they aren't distracted by needing to be the center of attention, they are basically conducting high-level psychological reconnaissance.
Think about it this way. People who constantly talk are essentially handing over their entire playbook for free. Every insecurity, every impulsive thought, every strategic pivot just gets broadcasted to the whole room. The quiet individual simply sits back, collects all those puzzle pieces, and quietly puts them together. They know exactly how to use this intel to their advantage, which gives them a tremendous tactical edge without ever needing to raise their voice.
But what happens when conflict arises? And that strategic stillness is suddenly no longer a choice. It isn't always some calculated power move in a boardroom. Sometimes it's something deeply biological, overwhelmingly powerful, and entirely out of their control.
That brings us to section 3, the biological freeze response and the actual science of emotional flooding. When an argument escalates and emotions spike, your nervous system basically yanks the emergency handbrake. During emotional flooding, your silence isn't a decision at all. It is a hardwired, ancient survival mechanism. It literally treats an intense emotional argument exactly like a life-or-death physical threat. Dr. Stephen Porges identified this as the dorsal vagal response. Listen, your nervous system doesn't wait around for your conscious permission to act. It simply pulls the plug. This results in an involuntary shutdown, absolute stillness, and profound withdrawal. Amazingly, it's the exact same biological mechanism as a deer freezing in the headlights to avoid a predator.
During this freeze, the brain experiences a little crash. It's exactly like a computer trying to run way too many heavy programs at once. First, a severe emotional threat is detected. Immediately after that, the prefrontal cortex, your brain's rational, logical thinking center, it literally disconnects. Following that, the language centers are disabled. You couldn't form a sentence right then if your life depended on it. And finally, full survival freeze mode is activated. You are completely locked out of your own voice, trapped inside a highly mobilized, stressed-out body.
People who experience this describe their mind turning to pure static, or feeling like their head is suddenly stuffed with thick, heavy cotton. Think back to a time when you were so overwhelmed during a fight that you literally couldn't speak. On the outside, you might look perfectly still, maybe even kind of indifferent or cold. But on the inside, your nervous system is running at 1,000 miles per hour, filled with pure, chaotic feeling, but without access to a single coherent word.
Let's look at section 4, protecting through silence, and something called the window of tolerance. This psychological adaptation means that shutting down during a fight isn't some character flaw, and it's definitely not a manipulation tactic. It's actually a highly evolved survival skill that your younger self built just to protect you. Psychologists refer to this as emotional cutoff. According to attachment researchers like John Bowlby, if you grew up in a home where expressing your pain out loud made things dangerous or unpredictable, your nervous system learned a really powerful, lasting lesson. Silence became the absolute safest, most reliable tool to weather the storm. And honestly, your brain doesn't just casually forget a strategy that kept you safe once you become an adult.
So, while a partner or colleague might be demanding immediate answers, pacing the room, maybe even yelling, the quiet brain is silently running a massive, rapid-fire stress test. They're internally asking themselves things like, did I contribute to this? Have I felt this specific danger before? What is this argument actually about beneath the surface? And will my words just make it worse? Speaking before they truly understand the dynamic carries a massive psychological risk, so they hold their tongue until the internal math finally adds up.
Think of this window of tolerance as the only room in a very, very chaotic house where humans actually speak the same language. Outside of that window, it's just pure emotional noise and collateral damage. By holding back until their nervous system returns to this safe psychological sweet spot, quiet people are very often doing the heavy lifting to save the relationship from unfiltered, deeply destructive emotional reactions that, let's face it, can never be taken back.
But coming back online from this freeze, yeah, it isn't a simple flick of a switch. It produces a grueling thawing process known as the vulnerability hangover. The lifting of the silence is definitely not instant relief. It's often accompanied by actual physical tremors, this deep, heavy exhaustion that feels like you literally just ran a marathon, and a raw, painful feeling of being completely exposed. They're flooded with shame simply for surviving the shutdown. It takes an incredible amount of energy to push through all of that and finally speak.
And that brings us to Section 5, the weight of words and the authority of the final word.
When that freeze finally lifts, the exhaustive processing is finished, and the quiet individual is genuinely ready to speak. Wow, their words carry tremendous power. Because they've processed the pain and the facts with such incredible thoroughness, their words are packed with emotional integrity. They offer deep, distilled truth rather than just reactionary noise. They aren't going to throw out wild accusations just to win a cheap point in the heat of the moment. No way. They've already turned the words over 100 times in their head, checking them for accuracy and fairness. Because they simply refuse to waste breath on trivialities, their voice carries a really natural, undeniable authority.
Ultimately, the immense restraint of the quiet mind just completely outmaneuvers the desperate volume of the loud world. While impulsive reactive environments rely on constant, shallow noise and quick outbursts, the quiet fortress operates entirely differently. They are calculated, they are fiercely loyal, and they prioritize deep processing over instant gratification. They are geared for lasting impact. They never ever engage in the exhausting battle of volume. Instead, they patiently wait and they win the war of impact.
So in a world that simply won't stop screaming, will you find your power in the pause? Really think about that the next time you encounter a quiet mind. Because the one who controls their tongue almost always controls the entire room. Never mistake their stillness for absence. Their silence is a profound, incredibly active presence. It is the absolute mark of the disciplined, the observant, and the truly strong. I really hope this explainer has completely reframed how you view the formidable power of the quiet mind. Thanks so much for learning with me today.